Think about this. All of the energy you got from the food you ate today originally came from the sun, and that's thanks to photosynthesis. In this experiment, we're trying to build a human-powered growth chamber, but we've got to figure out how to grow the plants and then how to get them to photosynthesize. This is the human-powered growth chamber that we built. I sit here and pedal. That pedaling runs a little electricity generator down there that sends energy to a battery, and then the battery runs lights inside this box right here where there's plants growing. So before dinner, we can just sit here and pedal for a few minutes and then reach inside. And look at that, we've got supper, a sugar beet. Yeah, we aren't there quite yet, but the end goal of this experiment is to complete this human-powered growth chamber so we can grow sugar beets inside. All we've managed to do up to this point is create the setup to transform my energy into light energy. But since we have light, we can now grow plants because they need the light to perform photosynthesis. To get our beet seeds to germinate and grow into this full beet plant that we can eat, we'll have to grow it in some sort of medium. Normally that's soil, but to try to make this growth chamber a little more self-sustaining, we're going to use some of these polymer granules, and they're just dry right now, but if you put water in them, they just soak up all the water and expand in size and then hold it for the plant over a longer period of time. But then it's also going to need some nutrients. So we're going to put a little bit of fertilizer in there, and this fertilizer contains nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, some of the major nutrients any living cell needs to produce all the different organic molecules it needs to survive. To grow really well, these beets are going to need some trace elements as well. For example, magnesium is needed to make every chlorophyll molecule in the leaves. A good source of those trace elements is just going to be some of this potting soil that we'll add to the bin as well. The package says it takes these beet seeds 14 to 21 days to germinate. So during that time, they don't need any sunlight because the mama plant packed them enough food inside each seed to get them through until they make leaves and start photosynthesizing themselves. Man. It's a good thing we've got 2 weeks before the little plants need light, because what we have for light right now isn't going to cut it. So I want as much of my pedal energy as possible to get into sugars in this beet, so I get as many calories out of it as possible. That means getting the exact amount of light and making it as efficient as possible. So the next step is going to be researching a little bit what light is best for growing these beets. The amount of sugars we get out of eating this beet are going to be in a direct relationship to the amount of light that the chloroplasts in the leaves can absorb. In that first step of photosynthesis called the light reactions, that solar energy is converted into chemical energy in the form of ATP and NADPH. Those are then used to power the second step of photosynthesis, the Calvin cycle, that actually builds the carbohydrates, like the sugars in here, from carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So what we get out of it ultimately starts with energy from the sun. And I want to pedal as little as possible. So I want all the light that I produce to be able to be absorbed in this leaf. And that's done by pigments in the leaves. So first step, we're going to do some chromatography to figure out what pigments are actually in these leaves to absorb that light energy. To do the chromatography, we'll just need this strip of paper here. Then we'll take a leaf off the beet plants that we have and smash a bunch of the pigments into a line at the bottom of the paper. I'll just roll a quarter on here to smash them out. Now whatever photosynthetic pigments were in the beet leaf are now on this piece of paper, and we're going to separate them now. To do that, we need a little bit of rubbing alcohol and some fingernail polish remover that contains acetone. And then we just hang this in our solvent, and that'll separate the pigments. So let's watch and see what colors we get out of this. Even though this beet leaf looks pure green, the chromatography experiment showed us that it actually contains several yellow and green pigments. When sunlight shines down on it, the light that gets reflected back into our eyes to see is the yellow light and green light. and that means it absorbs the purplish, bluish, orangish, and reddish light, and that's the energy that can actually be converted into that chemical energy that we can eat. So if I powered a light with my pedaling that produced light similar to sunlight, only these ends of the spectrum would get absorbed and the yellow and greens would be reflected back. So to make this as efficient as possible, that means I need lights that just produce the blues and the violets and the oranges and the reds, so all the energy can go into sugars. That's what I got to find now. As you can see, the growth chamber found its way into the house and has a few improvements. Most importantly, light. Look at those red and blue lights inside the growth chamber. I almost gave up hope of finding exactly the right light for this, but I got some help from some friendly marijuana growers on the internet. They pointed me towards these red and blue LED strip lights that run off a battery. Apparently they're really good for growing plants in small, hidden places, and since they run off a battery, they don't alert the power company to your illegal activities. And they're going to work perfect for our growth chamber here. Well, that's pretty good. We accomplished our goal of getting photosynthesis to take place inside of our growth chamber. We transferred our energy into light energy, and then we've got the germinating beets in there that are using the water we put in there and carbon dioxide from the air to produce their own sugars. Hopefully, they'll grow a beet someday that we can then eat. But this project isn't done yet because this is supposed to be totally human-powered and self-contained. That means we've got to close up the lid. But in doing that, the plants don't have a source of carbon dioxide in there. However, I'm producing carbon dioxide through cellular respiration. So the next step is finding a way to get my carbon dioxide into there to allow the plants to grow.
In order for plants to grow, they need inputs of carbon dioxide, water, and energy. The chemical process by which plants use these resources to manufacture glucose, the building blocks of plants, is called photosynthesis. In the process, oxygen gas is produced as a byproduct. The energy for photosynthesis originates in the sun and arrives at the earth as sunlight. This light has both a wave and a particle nature. The particles, or photons, are the smallest units of light. Photons oscillate along a path, which is measured as wavelengths. The light emitted from the sun contains photons in a wide spectrum of wavelengths, called the electromagnetic spectrum. Photosynthetic organisms use only a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, called visible light. Photosynthetic organisms contain pigments that facilitate the capture of wavelengths of light in the visible light range. The color of the pigment comes from the wavelengths of light reflected. Plants appear green because they reflect yellow and green wavelengths of light. Red and blue wavelengths of light are absorbed by these pigments and provide the energy that is used for photosynthesis. Within eukaryotic photosynthetic organisms, also known as photoautotrophs, the chemical reactions of photosynthesis occur within plant cells in specialized structures known as chloroplasts. Photosynthesis consists of two sets of reactions, the light-dependent reactions and the Calvin cycle. Within the chloroplast are small disc-like structures called thylakoids, which are surrounded by a fluid-filled space called the stroma. The reactions that synthesize glucose, the Calvin cycle, occur in the stroma. The light-dependent reactions occur in the thylakoid. It is here that conversion of light energy to chemical energy is initiated.